Good evening. This is the Tuesday, January 16th, 2024, the Board of Library Trustees regular meeting, and it is now 6:30. The meeting will be called to order. May we have a roll call? Secretary DiLorenzo, please.
Yes. Trustee Cox?
Here.
Trustee DiLorenzo, present. Trustee Nealon?
Here.
Trustee O'Keefe?
Here.
Trustee Senate?
Here.
Trustee Selmer?
Here.
Trustee Fishman?
Here. Thank you. One note of housekeeping, would everyone please be sure to turn off your cell phones? And just to be sure we don't get any calls. Thank you very much. Good. We will now do the review of our draft minutes from both November 21st, 2023, our regular board meeting. We'll take that first, as we did not have a December meeting, but we'll take the November 21st review of minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes as printed? Being no corrections or further discussion, the minutes stand approved. And may we have a motion? Well, they're not approved yet. May we have a motion, please, to approve?
I move approval of the November 21st, 2023 regular board meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. The minutes have been moved by Trustee O'Keefe and seconded by Trustee Summer. Secretary, may we have a
Yes. Trustee
roll call,
Cox?
please?
Yes.
Trustee DiLorenzo, yes. Trustee Nealon?
I think I need to abstain because I wasn't present at the meeting? No?
No.
You can.
Okay.
You reviewed them, and
I did, yeah.
if you accept them, yes, that's fine.
Trustee O'Keefe?
Yes.
Trustee Senate?
Yes.
Trustee Summer?
Yes?
Trustee Fishman?
Yes, thank you. The regular November 21st, 2023 board meeting minutes were approved. Thank you. Let's see, I'm sorry, did we do December separately, or did we do them together?
We don't have December minutes.
Oh, that's right. Duh. Hello. Good evening, everyone. We'll start again. Right. Thank you. All right. Moving on. Are there any public comments from our gallery this evening? All right. Thank you. Presentations. And Director Austin, would you like to introduce our presentation speaker
Certainly.
this evening? Thank you.
I'm happy to. So this evening, we have as our guest our architect and consultant from Ingberg Anderson, Joe Huberty, and he is here tonight to present a proposal for us to help us meet two of our goals. As you know, as part of our strategic plan initiatives for fiscal year 23-24, we have a goal to complete a responsive space needs assessment to inform and establish priorities for service design and capital planning. And this project, as part of our sustainable future goals to meet and anticipate future needs of the library and community, is also directed by our library facilities policy 610, which is titled Space Needs Assessment of Library Facilities, and which sets forth the following expectation. Periodically, and not less than every 10 years, an assessment of the space needs of the library's facilities is conducted to respond to the evolving needs of the community. As such, and given Joe's credentials and the fact that we have an established relationship here for the past 5 years through multiple projects, including our 2020 capital reserve study, our 2021 capital repairs project, and our 2023 current building automation system project, Joe has an intimate knowledge of the library's background, all of our various renovations, and obviously has a broad base of knowledge about this particular topic, having done projects just like this for other agencies. So I'd like to invite Joe to come to the table and talk with us this evening about his proposal that's included in your packet. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Is this okay? I mean, I'd like to make eye contact with everybody if I could. So,
Sure. Let's get you yeah, if you want to take the mic, go for it.
see if I can fling this across the room accidentally. Good. Thank you all for this opportunity to come and talk about your building and your community. I think when you look at the proposal, you can see that we believe strongly that anything related to space starts well beyond space. And it's really about the people in the community, what they need from their library, what types of services you are providing to them to meet those needs. And in some instances, we think it is space itself. In other ways, the space that you have is really a tool to help you deliver service to meet those other needs. But in any instance, before it's wall coverings, flooring, building systems, glass, brick, whatever a building is comprised of. It's really about the activities that go on in the building. And to really meet the needs of the community, you have to understand what those underlying needs are on an ongoing basis. And when you think about the wide variety of people that comprise any community, you recognize that we come in different sizes, different shapes, different histories, different backgrounds, different aspirations, different immediate needs on a day-to-day basis, and an ever-evolving series of needs over the course of our life. And we also come with families, friends, neighbors, and the library really has to think about how does it address that really wide variety of needs that come through the front door on a daily basis. And so when we think about the building design, we're really looking for a way to identify how does space adapt to that widest range of potential uses on that ever-changing daily basis. That has to start with an understanding of what people in the community today are looking for. Ultimately, we want to test those specific answers with this notion that things are going to change on an everyday basis. So what does it mean when those needs shift? And we don't want to suggest that a master plan leads to a specific set of overly architectural or fixed improvements to the building. In many instances, we're recommending leaving buildings alone, moving furniture. In some instances, we're suggesting that perhaps a library system has too much space and needs to consolidate. In some instances, we're finding that space isn't distributed in alignment with population distribution. In some instances, it's more about quality of space rather than quantity. So going into these processes, we're never really sure of where the end result is going to be. We're really cognizant of the fact that the only way to find something that resonates with the community is to get them involved in the process of assessing need and then thinking about how space influences how well they can access those services, whether or not the building kind of helps precipitate certain behaviors, whether or not it supports staff or fights staff in the delivery of those services, and whether or not it resonates with a community sense of both tradition, what do I know about my library, what do I expect it to continue, and aspiration. What would I really like my library to be able to do for me moving forward? And without that kind of input, anything that's subsequent to that really becomes more idiosyncratic to either an architect or, excuse me, or a staff, a flavor of the day. And we're really trying to avoid the temptation to look at trendy and think of it as a trend. But we do want to acknowledge that there are trends in the evolution of library service. Excuse me. Asthma's no fun. And there's also trends in the way that we think about the role of the library. When I was growing up, it was really an individual sort of text-focused library experience. And now many libraries are acknowledging that there's a really broad array of ways in which people learn, recreate, engage, much of which is much more hands-on, more interactive, more social, as well as some of those very traditional, I'm here as an individual, here to be focused, types of library experiences. So thinking about the ways in which space can be defined to support a wide variety of user behaviors as well as user needs is an important part of the planning process. Those initial conversations with you, with your staff, with the members of the community that frequent the library, and if we can find a way, members of the community that don't really utilize the services of the library as much as you might like, are the springboard for the next step in the process, which is to take a look at what you really do have. I know you've paid great attention to the building, and there's parts of this building that I'm sure are working about as well as you could possibly imagine, and we don't want to do any harm to any of that. Acknowledge that there are things that are working and build upon that success. There are parts of the building that may be overtaxed. There are parts of the building that might be underutilized. There are parts of the building that haven't had the attention that something like the children's level has had recently. I know you're testing new services with the makerspace. We want to take advantage of all of that and address those spaces in the building or those components of the service that haven't had the update, the fine-tuning, the sort of tailoring to meet specific community needs that some of your recent efforts have produced. So having looked at what your sense of the long-term needs are and what the building can support, the third step in the process is to really define a series of options that might bridge that gap. Because we don't know what the goals are yet, and we haven't done our assessment of what the existing conditions are, it's hard to predict exactly what the nature of some of those bridging elements might be. But the general intent is to start as simple as we can, leverage what you've got, and then to work our way through a series of very flexible kind of solutions, think furniture more than walls, and try and see if we can meet the needs of the community by rearranging what you have. Perhaps rearranging some of that and adding new, replacing the things that are antiquated or legacy items, and then see if there's anything that is missing from the performance goals that were set at the beginning of the project. If there are things that you can't accomplish that are important, then the next series of studies might include moving a few walls, rearranging things in the building. Our goal with a strategic facility assessment is to make sure that we don't presume too much about the existing conditions, that just because it exists doesn't mean it's working well. We aren't coming in with the mindset that we have to empty the whole building and start from scratch, but we don't want to artificially lock into place something that either you are frustrated with or the community has expressed some dissatisfaction with. And in some instances, it's really been, if we had only moved that name of space somewhere else, this whole building would work much easier. When we try and do those evaluations, partly from a staff point of view, you need to be efficient. Part of being sustainable is making sure that you can operate the facility long-term within a reasonable operating budget. But we also want to take it from an end user's point of view. What is it like to walk in the front door and wonder where to go next? Wonder where to go next when I've got 3 kids in tow? Wonder where to go next if I have mobility issues? Wonder where to find that sense of surprise and delight if I've actually been lucky enough to retire and I live in Wilmette and I come into this building every day, and I'm going to for the next, hopefully, 30-some years. The goal is to find a way that the building can really be comprehensible instantly, but always a source of surprise and delight in a way that doesn't sort of draw attention and focus to it in and of itself, but supports that notion of the library as a place of discovery. Underlying all of this is a pretty pragmatic look at the functional components of the building. You've got to have enough places to store materials. You've got to present them in ways that entice people to pull things off the shelf. You're not a warehouse. You're about discovery and discernment as well as fulfillment. You are about depth of resource. There's an expectation of a quality of life that goes not only to kind of what the building looks like and feels like, but also the depth and richness of resources that you can offer. And that starts with things like print. It extends to things like, where do I sit? It's where do I get some work done? Can I find a quiet place? Can I access the technology that the world has to offer? And what does that mean to me as an introvert, as an extrovert, as a parent of multiple children? So thinking about that experience for each of those imaginable groups as they come into the building. What is it like if I live right next door? What does it mean if I live on the far end of the district? Can I find a place to park? Do I come here as often as I should, would like to, or is it problematic? What are the ways in which the library reaches out to me through digital services, and therefore I don't need to make a physical visit to the library? If I'm looking for a special experience and the only option is to visit the physical library, how convenient is that? How enjoyable is it? Am I comfortable? Do I feel welcome? Those are all the evaluations that we want to do with each of the component options that might be possible to bridge the gap between your goals and your actual physical conditions. The last piece of the pragmatics is to add up what all of those strategies might cost, because you can imagine that a really bold, beautiful dream is really expensive, and you can imagine that it might be pennies on the dollar. And the hope is that through the process, we can weigh what you gain through each of the concepts against what it costs to implement that concept. And you'll be surprised that most often the expensive strategy is not the best performing strategy. And often there's a balance point that achieves the majority of the goals at a fairly reasonable price. We're pretty fond of saying that the last 10% is the glitz, but the core of the problem is usually modifying the things that you think of as pretty ordinary items and arranging them in ways that support basic human behaviors. So this isn't necessarily about the nature of the woodwork or the quality of the carpet on the floor, those certainly impact people's perceptions of the quality of the space. But they're about people flow through the building. It's about quality of light. It's about acoustic separation. It's about the availability of the service they're looking for at the moment, and knowing that the friendly, smiling face that they're hoping to find to help them when they need that help is there and available. And it's an intuitive process. So at the end of that series of options, we would come together again and sift through those various strategies, what they cost, and come to some discernment about how to implement the best balanced approach to delivering on the service that you've committed to provide to the community. And if it's a very simple, straightforward process, that's awesome. If it's a multi-phase series of improvements, that's fine too. If it's a more ambitious strategy, sometimes we'll be surprised, but if that's the answer in your minds, the toughest part here is to take all of this information and these thoughts and make an informed decision within your purview as trustees of this library, and make a decision about how best to meet the community's needs, not only today, but for coming generations. Even if this is a simple project, it's going to be an investment of something, and everyone wants that investment to pay off for a significant amount of time, sometimes for generations. So depending on what the outcome is, we all have to be confident that that return on investment will stand the test of time and continue to meet the needs of the community for those users yet to walk through your front door. It sounds a little nebulous, and in some ways it is, and that's intentional. The idea is not to come in and tell you, I've already figured out what you need to do, because I don't know. And if I had an inkling, I probably wouldn't tell you. The idea is to sort of understand what you perceive from your users, what you perceive as trustees for your employees as well as for your public, and to take direct input from all those people and see what they think about the experience and the nature of the service, and then go where that information takes us. As I said, we've been surprised on a number of occasions. So allow us a little sort of time at the beginning to think through who you want to reach out to, what's the best way to engage them. I think we're all worn out with surveys and meetings and who knows what other forms of contact, but there are a few ideas to try and, I don't want to say trick, but entice people into participating a little bit more directly than they may otherwise have done. And then there's ways to take what we've gleaned, develop a few ideas, and then throw them back out and then get them to react. So there's multiple opportunities to gauge the public's interest in what we're proposing. I think that would be the key. And through those first two steps, things really do start to coalesce into overarching strategies, and you'll have a better sense of where that third step really might take us. It becomes a little bit more specific in that third part of the process as to where we want to go, because we've heard from the key stakeholders in the community. So that's a bit of an overview. I think there are probably questions, and I'd be happy to answer anything that you'd like to know about the process or the product.
You talked about gathering customer feedback, but yet there is a concern there could be fatigue, survey fatigue.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit more about some of the strategies
Yeah.
that you have invoked in the past or that you recommend
Right.
you use here to gather feedback?
So I think part of it is to acknowledge that there are some people who are predisposed to participate in general and others who are not. And then those who are predisposed to participate might be inclined to one form or another. And what we would like to suggest is that the more of the techniques that you employ, the better are the chances are that you'll engage enough of the broader sense of the community to understand what the qualitative issues are. It's going to be hard to be scientifically quantitative through any of the means. But if we can start to get a sense of what issues are first and foremost in people's minds, we can get a sense of where we need to explore. So passive things that take advantage of people just being in the building, or you already have a newsletter. There's a website that I'm sure we can post some things on and people can click or post a comment. Or so if you're a frequent visitor, or you just like using the digital services, or you're always at story time and we can hand out a little flyer, we really want to tap into the things that are little effort for the end user and that are already part of your communication strategy. as one significant strategy. Another might be to think about who the key constituents are in certain demographic or user groups. So if it's teens is a classic example, if it's returning students, if it's parents of children, if it's caregivers who aren't parents, seniors, people who are interested in technology, whatever the groups that you think are underrepresented or are key users, we might identify a time to meet with them either here or at a place where it's easier for them to kind of gather. Homeschooling is another example of a group that libraries often seek out. The more challenging, but perhaps more effective and a little bit more innovative approach would be to think of library engagement almost as a, I don't want to say Tupperware party because I've understood that Tupperware is gone now. But the idea of going into a more comfortable home setting, and it wouldn't actually be us because I'm not part of the group. I'd be an intruder in your home. I'd be an official of the library or something of that nature. But if you've got people who are engaged in the library as a user and are willing to sort of have a little gathering, and you've got a series of questions that you would like to have addressed, you have a gathering in the home, they report back what they're thinking, and it's a social way to gather some input. There's a chance to sort of talk amongst yourselves and kind of bounce ideas off and then turn them over to the library. The city of Madison has done it to pretty significant success in the design of their facilities, and it's found ways to engage people that either don't come to the library frequently or aren't comfortable standing up in a public setting and stating a position. There's no comfort in a room like this for most people. So that's another technique that's worked well. And then relying on you to understand where do people go to really have real conversations. In Evansville, Indiana, we ended up at a breakfast diner. It's called a Naughty Pine, but we called it the Naughty Pine because most of the politicians who frequented the place ended up doing a little bit of time. But that's where people went to excuse me, hang out and talk about what are the really important issues in the community and what do we need to decide as a group of concerned citizens. Sometimes it's the Methodist Church. We've gone to fish boils. Sometimes it's you stand out in front of the big game and hand out, come see us, or here's a questionnaire. So understanding who you're in competition with for people's time so that you don't try and distract them from something fun. And understand that going to people is often more effective than trying to get people to come to you. Would be one of the strategies.
Just a comment on that is that other municipal groups, what comes to mind is the Park District, and they have been very open and outward in their same kind of trying to get feedback and so forth. So they've gone and had a variety of different meeting places and times and so forth. So that may be certainly options.
Right.
But to
I
that
learned.
point, I think to the issue of fatigue, and here's another survey. So
Right.
I think we have to be creative. Do you ever do collaboration with any other school groups or, any other type of partnerships?
Right. As a community addressing the needs of a number of services through a single event. Sometimes it's more of an open house where you go to the parks group or the library or social services or whatever it is, and it's not sort of, I have to sit here and listen to everybody or wait my turn until that group comes up. So it can be a little bit more low-key. But that would condense the number of times people have to engage to address the full range of services that they might be interested in participating with.
Got a question.
Yeah.
One of the things in the goals or
Trish, come
considerations-
closer to the microphone,
Oh,
please.
sorry. One goal or consideration was identifying quiet areas and more lively areas. And things are really getting very lively.
Yeah.
And actually, in 2021, when I was elected to the board, like the day after, I was out in the alley with my car, and the guy from across the street came over and said, "It's just, you got to make it quieter over there." I mean, I was like, I mean, like, it's just, it just seems like, he was almost saying it's a sacred space, I just enjoyed
Right.
it so much when I was a kid, and, and I still, that's what I want out of it, and, it's just, and so I guess my question is, and this is just real, like, it's both nitty-gritty and theoretical, but like, how would you, like, could you give me an example of how you would address that without putting up a wall? How you would make
acoustic
a place
separation?
quiet?
Yeah. We do want to acknowledge that there are some things where you do want pretty significant enclosure. There's a couple of spaces where you just let things occur, and you try to arrange things that take advantage of natural acoustic barriers. So distance is one. You don't put quiet study rooms right near your front door, because it doesn't matter how tightly the walls are insulated, that kind of activity will bleed through a wall. We try and take advantage of the mass of things like collections. So a series of book stacks between a noisy activity and a quiet activity will dampen the transfer of noise. Soft surfaces will absorb sound better than hard surfaces. We know there's a lot more effort that goes into taking care of a soft surface, not as forgiving in terms of maintenance, but there's a trade-off there. The other thing to think about is the nature of providing parallel environments based on how people want to access a service. We've done a few projects where the emphasis is tried to be on, we have enough space to do each thing one time. And because there's social access to technology and individual focused access to technology in one space, someone's always unhappy. And it's usually the person that wants quiet. It's much more effective to take that space where we try to accomplish everything for everyone in one space and split it and put some of it in an active zone and put some of it in a quiet zone. So that sense of I can take care of everybody because they come to one service point is really saying to the end users, don't come and use our technology because you're not going to be happy with it and the space sits empty. So it was a false economy. So whether it's by distance, by wall surface, by varying degrees of enclosure, or actual physical separation, there's a sort of series of steps to help mitigate sound transmission. Yeah.
I have a question. What other kinds of data do you use besides the data that you'll gather from Wilmette? Like, for instance, I'm assuming we're not completely dissimilar from like a Deerfield or an Evanston. So do you,
Right.
do you draw on
We do.
literature or other studies
Yeah.
to kind of inform?
We try not to do it sort of with any belief that there's a magic truth in it, but it's a relevant point of comparison. So the data we like to collect is for you over a series of years. And if there's certain time markers for when you've changed strategies with respect to service, we want to sort of look at those kinds of periods. And typically we go back to 2000. And so we'd look at 2000 to the current time. And if there's sort of, the last one we did, this big renovation. So we look at the data in those kinds of groups and see if there's overarching trends that we can discern in kind of how effective some of the ideas that have been implemented have been, and if there's long-range trends. In the case of Winnetka, they broke most of the sort of assumptions about what that data was supposed to tell us. People are don't read books anymore. They don't really care about print. Those sorts of things. So a lot of libraries are downsizing collections, and Winnetka's data said the best thing you can do is actually increase the size of your physical collection. So that was based on looking at how much they borrowed from other libraries. It was looking at the wait times to get books. It was looking at comments that they got each and every day from, why don't you have this? I need this in this language. So it was very specific to Winnetka, and it violated the trends that you would see by looking at national trends for libraries of a certain size, library trends for libraries serving communities of certain affluence, education, demographics. So we want to make sure that when we're looking at these data points, we're putting it into the context of what do we know about the community and what is it trying to tell us, what do we know about our library that would suggest that the data is a bit of a surprise or reinforcing kind of what we thought we already knew. We'll do that for groups that people would recognize as nearby neighbors because they go there or their friends go there. It's a known entity. And then we'll ask staff to think about who are your aspirational peers, some of whom may be nearby, some of whom might be, several states away. But you know of them through professional references, and they do a certain service that we'd like to deliver exceptionally well. So what is it about the service and the space that supports that service that we want to look at and understand how your experience matches that? So there'll be a series of peer groups, national, state, county, aspirational, and then just the ones that are known to you, to your residents. The other thing that we'd like to do, and this really depends on a partnership between the County Graphic Information Services, GIS, and the library. If there's data that you have about who in the generic sense, not a name, where your borrowers live, and if we can discern any significant deviation in the level of use based on how far away from the building you are, that would be a useful piece of information. If you can do the same for attendees at a conference or a program, I recognize this gets to be a little bit more difficult, but there's anything that talks about distribution of service versus distribution of people, we'd like to understand that. So that would be another data point. And sometimes GIS services are cooperative and sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have the data, sometimes you don't. But those are the sort of outside data points that we would tend to look at.
In the proposal, there was some mention of, as part of the investigative process, the use of customer mapping.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about that? I'm assuming you're
Yeah.
not like tracking customers as they move through the library. How do you
No.
gather the information for the customer
Right.
mapping? How does that work?
Yeah, I basically walk through the building every time I'm here. Sometimes it's just random. The baseline, though, is a more organized sort of thinking about the library as a series of segments over the course of a day. Early morning, it might be the story time group. After story time, it might be the lunchtime crowd. After that, it might be kids getting out of school, so there's the after-school crowd. There might be a different early evening. We've got a bunch of meetings, kind of, I need to do some studying, I need to catch up on, I just got to get out of the house to get anything done kind of crowd. We want to look at where they go in the building. Part of this is to determine if you have enough seating. Part of it is to determine if the seating that you have is supporting what they want to do. Part of it is to think about, we put a bunch of fancy seating in this arrangement because it looked cool on a drawing, and in fact, nobody sits there because it's too creepy to sit in the middle of an aisle. I want a defensible space. So sometimes it's convincing the interior designer, let's not use that kind of seating. Sometimes it's, soft, comfy lounge chairs send the right kind of message, but in fact, most people want to spread out on a table, and we've got to adjust our balance kind of thing. Sometimes it works in the reverse. So understanding what the real behaviors are and trying to ascertain what's the underlying attraction for that behavior. Sometimes it's being near the window, light view. Sometimes that's where the power is. Sometimes it's because it's away from the aisle. There are people that want to come and just see people. I'm trapped in my house all day, every day. I don't have a job that engages with other people. I come to the library to be part of a community. So if there's that sort of place where I can be part of the milieu, great. And trying to discover how we should balance the amount of seating within those different environments. There are studies, and this isn't included, that actually would try and kind of watch people as they go into an aisle and figure out if they come out with something, great. If they don't, why not? Do you not have it? Or do you not have it in their mind because it's hard to read spine out, it's got a little postage stamp and you're dewy kind of thing. Are there things we could do to make that easier? And the old suburban library system actually engaged a retail behavioralist to Animal Kingdom style stop people and say, why'd you come in? I was looking for an Italian cookbook. Well, we have some. I couldn't find them. Well, would you mind if we went back in and looked? And the questions were, did you use a catalog? And it was like 8% of the people using 3 public libraries in the south suburbs actually would use a catalog. And then 12% of the user population would actually stop and ask someone at a desk. So that's 20% of the people that were in the building looking for a physical item actually used one of the 2 common resources for finding something. Everybody else was judging books by their cover. And if the aisle is narrow and the ranges are tall and the lighting is kind of poor and, there's a big hairy guy like me in the aisle, people just wander by and they don't find an environment that's conducive to serendipitous discovery, or there's no way for them to become aware of the collections that you've curated. So we make presumptions without actually stopping them. One of the data points that we'll want is to look at your circulation data by location in the building, and then look at those environments and say, yeah, they're code minimum, they're really super dark, everything is spine out, or it's a great display, it's just facing the wrong direction, or whatever the rationale is. Look for ways that just by arranging the books in a different way, you can drive circulation based on responding more directly to human behavior. And the mapping is really to understand how people are behaving in your space and see if there's any disconnect between typical behaviors and the way you're forcing people to use your building. Architecture, it's a social science.
I just have kind of one comment. I really appreciate that you did a great job. And I saw in several places you would say something like, we'll work with as much as possible, and I'm the treasurer, so I'm always talking money.
Yeah.
And I appreciate for financial reasons and also supporting our sustainability mission. So I would encourage you when you're doing these plans, which I've seen in here, as much as we can use that we have, I think just as a really good example for our community that we are trying to be sustainable and
Right.
not just with the materials, but also financially.
Yeah, it's
So
too
I
easy to think of sustainability in too thin of a,
Yes.
it's a veneer, and
Yeah.
it should be more
Yeah.
systemic.
Yeah. Let's see. There's a couple places in there that you talk about funding strategies, and I think based on your presentation, what you're correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about, because you'll have different options, will depend on what the funding strategies are.
Right.
So for example, there is a mention in there of the word referendum, which is a big
Right, the R word.
which freaks me out, but I assume that's because you talk about there are different options, and what, depending on what our options are, may depend on, is that kind of what you're thinking?
Right.
Okay.
Right. One of the first questions we ask on every project is, what kind of money are you interested in spending?
Yeah.
And how does that money show up? So the end product is usually a series of implementation strategies.
Mm-hmm.
If you had the resources to do it all at once, here's what it would cost. If you're looking at a series of 4 projects, and they may or may not all be targeted at, we've got $800,000 a year, kind of, let's do it this way. And then it's really up to you. Let's borrow ahead so we can enjoy it now and pay it off. Let's save up, and then when we've got that money, we'll go and we'll do it right. Or, this first package, pretty straightforward, pretty simple, really big impact. Let's just get that done, and then next year we'll talk about whether or not we should implement. All of that is sort of within your purview, and we want to give you realistic, reasonable options that aren't, there's 4 here, but really there's only 1.
But within that, though, you're not just going to give us one option and say, you can do this one option within different steps. You can do it
No.
all at once. You might say, here's the big, my dream, my absolute everything. Here's
Right.
one that meets the absolute needs of the community, like whatever the most basic is. Here's the next one that's the absolute needs, plus a few wants that,
Right.
whatever the things might be, with different rough
Right.
estimates of what those scenarios might cost.
The process, for Winnetka Northfield, it was close both buildings, buy another building, close both buildings, build a new building, make the one building really, really big, leave the other one alone, keep the one building, make it really, really big, close the other one, leave everything alone, and then the one they selected was leave the one kind of alone and make the small one bigger. And partly it was distribution of population, part of it was it fit well within the reserves and the available resources. It addressed political issues, and it gave them enough total space that would. So that's the strategy. And at each point, you get a little closer to a full vision. But the idea is some of these strategies don't make sense. Let's take them off the table so that we can actually put more effort into the ones we're serious about. And then ultimately, the final recommendation is sort of, here's the one we believe in. We've discounted these. It costs this. We've got a couple of ways to implement it. Then the next step is you make a decision, and then a subsequent project implements it.
Okay, good, thank you.
I'm not the treasurer, but I also like to talk about money a
Okay.
lot. So the contract is for $24,000.
Right.
And then you also have an additional optional service for this fee for the ethnographic research.
Right.
Approximately, or in other library systems that may have gone down that road for that, can you speak to like the ballpark number for that? Or is that
Yeah.
really dependent upon what is provided?
You hit on the key parameters. How many topics do you want studied? How many people are engaged in that study? Excuse me. And then how much of the follow-up video editing can you do in-house? So the nearest example, again, is Winnetka Northfield. It was $6,000 for the ethnographer to help frame the questions and analyze the data. The library did the follow-up video editing, and we managed to talk the software company into donating the software that was downloaded onto people's phones so that they could video themselves and do the recording, and we could do the editing. I don't know if we could talk the same company into a similar donation. There are 2 or 3 companies that provide equivalent products, and we could try and talk someone else into the donation. But the proposal is really based on the idea of 24 downloads at $50 to $70 per download for the software, and then the ethnographer, and we think that's the $8,000 range.
And that would be in addition to the 24,000?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you want, we can have someone do all of the video editing, post-production kind of things for another 2. Those are ballpark. I'd be
Oh,
happy
of
to make
course.
that
But,
an hourly not to exceed if you're interested.
But it looked like, based on reading this, you didn't think it was necessary. And can you?
I don't.
Okay.
Unless there's something that, in Winnetka, we did it really because there was a clear understanding that there were perceptions among some decision makers that spaces were working in a totally different way than staff had observed directly. And what we wanted to do was capture real behaviors of real people outside of either of those perceptions. And then we wanted to reinforce this notion that an earlier design project had made a mistake in terms of positioning staff. Right now, when you walk into the Winnetka building, more often than not, you'll come in behind the staff. You'll walk in and the librarian is facing away from you, which isn't good for anybody. And the video showed the patron come in and say, well, they're never looking, but I know to wave and say hello, and then they turn around and look at me. And then the librarian turns around and says, hello, right? So there were really 3 things that confirmed what everybody knew, and then the one thing that was a total surprise to some people, but we knew to ask that question because it was not a surprise to other people. If there's anything that you think is in that nature, or you just don't understand why people are frustrated with a certain aspect of using the building, it might be worth it. But for the most part, I would think that you've got some pretty good insights based on the amount of engagement you do with your public already, and your history with trying new things in the building that, yeah, we did talk, and we weren't all that far.
I have an additional money question.
Yeah.
In your plan, you identify that there's reimbursable expenses that are outside the $24,000.
Right.
Just curious, on a project this size, do you have an estimate of how much that might be over the course of a
Yeah,
project
it's not going to be
like
much. I live outside Milwaukee, but we have a Chicago office, so I don't measure distance from Milwaukee. I measure it from our Chicago office, which is next to the airport, next to here. And then typically within Cook County, we don't charge anything because we're supposed to be local, right? Printing is going to be nominal. Just about everything gets delivered in digital form If there's any sort of, I don't know, you want to go and see something in Brooklyn, I don't know. That kind of travel would be an expense. But for the most part, there's nothing for any of the software. We own all the software. It's covered in our overhead rates.
So in general,
Yeah.
the travel is going to be really nominal because you're considered
Yeah,
local and
we're talking a couple $100, maybe.
not
Yeah.
10,000. Okay.
Right, no. One of the things with the ethnography would have been, the ethnographers from New York City. And that would have been, we could have done that virtual if we'd wanted to, but if we'd brought them, that would have been a plane ride and probably a hotel. Yeah,
So a year ago, in our park district, did this sort of study, they did use a variety of methods. They sent postcards with QR codes,
Mm.
and you could go on and fill out a survey. They had digital Post-its, basically, you could just,
Mhm.
website, you go on and just type whatever you wanted, that would be improving.
right,
They had physical Post-its that were actually, I can see them. You walk
Yeah.
into the fitness center, where it's just a bulletin board, and every day there were
Yep.
just stacks of Post-its that people were writing.
right,
It would be interesting to know where they got the best ideas from, or
right,
where, like, how our community responded.
Yeah.
Was it more digital, was it more physical, was it conversations?
Right.
Just in terms of what data they ended up using.
Right. Yeah. And if they did it at multiple steps, we found that some people will come out early and engage with the, hey, what would you like to see in your library? Most people wait for those initial sketches. They're easy to react to. And then the Post-its just come fast and furious. That's actually pretty effective. We've done similar programs where someone from the library will take those to schools, to wherever you have an outreach program, engage people that way, but it's a similar strategy, Post-it note, really low tech, and then a digital equivalent. The drawings are posted on the website, click here to make a comment, kind of thing. That seems to work pretty well in most communities.
In the proposal, you listed a number of projects at local, suburban libraries.
Right.
And I'm curious if you can describe some of the projects you worked on where you did use sustainable, lower cost, creative problem-solving solutions. As Tracy mentioned, we're very focused on budget.
Right.
So where that has been very successful and
Yeah.
where you've employed some kind of creative problem.
Well, the one that stands out most is Barrington, because they just failed a referendum to expand their 60,000 square foot building to 144,000 square feet. We managed to fit it on the site, I don't know how. But it was, they added one or two staff rooms and one small meeting room, and the rest of everything else was all more books in a building that was already, looked like a law library, kind of packed tight. And that got crushed, and new leadership came in and said, we're never going to pass anything. We've got 60,000 square feet. How are we going to make the best 60,000 square foot building for our community? And that's where it was more of a strategy about, we're just going to, and it started out being pretty arbitrary, a third books, a third activity space, and a third community gathering. There was another third that was staff, but you get the idea. We took the public space and partitioned it. As we worked through it, it was actually ended up pretty close to that. I think at the end of it, they were a little frustrated that they wished they'd kept a few more books. But they took 40% of the physical collection out of the building, and after the renovation, circulation was up 28%. So it really spoke to the strategy of you have to be able to browse. And in fact, the reduction in the collection wasn't literally 40%, because so much of it was in circulation, they could actually buy more stuff, and it was living out in the world and not taking up shelf space. But this whole notion of face out, face out, face out really pays off. They needed enough of a reserve so they could keep pulling things up. And every day they had to restock a couple bottom shelves, and every time someone walked by, they had to pull one and put it on the shelf. But they were pretty rigorous about the rule of three. People will always take the middle one. 3 sells better than 2, sells better than 1, sells way better than 4. Any even number should be out, kind of thing. And then in the stacks, every vertical section had one shelf that was displayed in that rule of 3. So you always kind of knew where you were in the collection. Look, it's all motorcycle repair books. I'm in the motorcycle repair aisle. And it also enticed you. And then they took the strategy of, just because it isn't new doesn't mean it doesn't deserve a face-out position. So that notion of drawing on related materials to whatever is new or topical, or, you know, it's local history month or banned book month or whatever it is, they would pull whatever they thought was relevant. So essentially, it was almost always all staff picks in some form or another, and that really drove circulation. So even though the footprint for a collection was down, circ was up. In theory, their holdings were down, but in fact, they owned a lot of books that you never saw in the building. They were always out and about. So that was one of the strategies where it was, no one really thinks of it as the sort of cost-effective thing because, well, it was $8 million, but they did replace all the mechanical systems. We replaced most of the roof. We did renovate the entire interior of the building with the exception of the staff zone. But it started out as well, we need paint and carpet and our air handler is broken. What are we going to do? And it worked its way up from, we're not going to go into all this much trouble without kind of really dramatically improving service. And so we added an elevator. We ended up moving restrooms, one of the no-nos. We moved the main stair, another no-no. So one of the reasons it cost a lot was we moved a lot of the things you're not supposed to move, but they totally transformed the building. And instead of, you go past, well, it was a Romeo and Juliet balcony, there was a guard, and then there was the circ desk of 6 stations where it looked like Gringotts from Harry Potter, where you really had to earn your way through a gauntlet, and then past the stair, and then past the room of bereavement, and then past the restrooms, and then you got into the library. So that was totally transformative. You walk in the door, and there's a bunch of cool stuff for you, and a friendly, smiling face, and all the staff stuff got pushed back to the edge. So it was a few key things that cost a lot of money, and at each opportunity, the board went from $3 million, $3.5 million, $4 million is foolish. We're not really getting anything for it other than new carpet. Let's try and do something more. So that was the surprising one in a lot of ways. People love it way more than they ever would have the 144,000 square feet of more stuff that no one knew you had. And the trustees, who were pretty conservative, talked themselves into spending more money than they thought they were going to, and then it ended up being known as the game changer. For most of our projects, it is literally paint, carpet, and let's rearrange the furniture. I mean, most of those projects in that series, 90% of all of them are basically that. Better lighting would be the let's go crazy kind of bit. So Barrington's the sort of big example of half measures weren't going to do any good. Most buildings are set up a little bit better and don't suffer from the series of additions that that building had. So.
But you know us so well, and I think that's, that to me is, reinforces my confidence that
Thank you.
You've worked with us, you know so much about what is, what we have, and how we've maintained it in our 20-year study. So
Right.
I have to say that that's very reassuring.
Thank you.
And hearing our comments that we learn and we listen, we learn, we ask people what they're looking for, a la as you mentioned, Carolyn, that I think our community is open to and responsive to being asked. And
Yeah.
people are very passionate about the library. So I think we'll get a lot of great feedback that,
Right.
that we have.
I would hope so. Yeah, I expect that.
Expect that. Right.
Yeah.
I just have one last comment, it's kind of on Renee. So with your contract, which the proposal's $24,000.
Right.
But say we were going to put a not to exceed because of the expenses. You say they're so minimal, but I don't know if minimal means $1,000, $5,000?
Oh, yeah, if it's
I-
1,000, we'll definitely be under that.
Okay. So we
Right.
can talk amongst ourselves what we would be
Yeah.
comfortable. I just didn't want to, if it was, you thought that'd be $2,000 and we say, we're giving you $500, that, I don't want to I want to be mindful of that.
Yeah,
We give you a little flexibility to,
Frankly, I would start at 500, and if
Well-
for some reason we're,
well, we can figure that
yeah,
out.
okay.
Thank you.
Good treasurer.
She is. She's really good.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Joe? Good questions. I hope,
Yep.
Thank you so
you know,
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all.
Very much.
Great.
Really exciting.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for coming out tonight and being so thorough.
Okay, so we'll take a little break from this conversation and get back into our regular board business, talk a little bit about operations and finances, and then we'll come back and get to that
problem.
topic. Yeah.
Okay, treasurer's report. Thank you.
Okay. I have a number of things tonight. Tax bills were due December 1st. The library received almost $1 million in revenue in November and about $1.5 million in December. In November, there were not any special reserve expenditures. As I mentioned in the November board meeting, Anthony was going to purchase 2 CDs for the general fund. They are the last 2 listed in the general fund listing at 5.3 and 5.5% with 18 and 24-month maturity dates. There are a number of CDs coming due in February, and Director Austin and I will talk about the possible needs for these funds and determine how and if they will be reinvested in CDs. As requested, the consultant cleaned up the equity section of the balance sheet by rolling the prior year's income into the beginning fund balances. As I noted in the November meeting, in July, there was that miscellaneous income for $13,499, and they did finally correct it in the November statement, so that's been fixed. In December, there was a check to Interactive Building Solutions in the amount of $105,435. That is a partial payment for the BAS system, and we approved, just a reminder, a total of $151,800 for that project. In addition, there was a small check of $750 to Enberg Anderson, also, I believe, for the BAS project. Kind of going along with the tax revenue, you'll see the balance sheet for December 23. Compared to November 23, the net loss decreased from $1.2 million to $400,000 as a result of the tax revenue, receiving the tax revenue. In December, there were 3 payrolls. You'll note, I'm sure you didn't, but in November and December, there were 2 checks each month to Comcast in about of $1,200 and $377. And I talked to Director Austin about this. We aren't cutting our phones off because we are still in the process of it. We're not cutting them off till February. So we'll continue to see the voice bill for the next couple cycles. And we still will have some payment to them for our ISP and emergency landline, phone provider and elevator. So that will continue, but the big bulk will be gone. And then in December, there was a check to Bernard Lane in the amount of $15,520 for building maintenance. And they are doing business as Monarch Electric, and this check was for coring, electrical data, and labor for the updated relocated computers near the newly combined reference tech desk. Has to do with moving the makerspace. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Mary Ann, did you have anything you want to mention?
Just that also on the notes on financial reports for December of '23, there were multiple checks to CDW government, pretty much in excess of $16,000, and I believe that was for computers for the makerspace.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions on any checks, disbursements, income, revenue, anything? Okay.
Seeing none, thank you. Thank you. Would you like to, we have a prerogative to approve the items, both the check details and bills and salaries for both November and December together, or take them separately?
Together's
We can
fine.
do,
Yeah,
okay.
separate.
Seeing no other discussion, may we have a motion, please?
I move approval of the bills and salaries check detail for November and December 2023 as presented.
Is there a second, please?
My second?
Okay. All right, thank you. We have a motion from trustee Cox and a second by trustee DiLorenzo. And the motion, may we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cox?
Yes?
Trustee DiLorenzo, yes. Trustee Nealon?
Yes.
Trustee O'Keefe?
Yes.
Trustee Senate?
Yes?
Trustee Summer?
Yes?
Trustee Fishman?
Yes, thank you. Then the motion has been moved and seconded and approved for bills and salaries for November and December 2023 as presented. Thank you. We'll now move on to our action item then, and is there additional discussion or?
I do.
Very good. Trustee Summer?
He did a great job answering most of my questions. I'm just going to make a little statement. In Anthony's email to the board, there's a comment about the anticipated budget of the future renovations for the first and lower level of $3 million. And based on the discussion today, and I'm happy that there will be several options, including some that are less expensive, hopefully. As indicated each year when we pass the appropriation and when we pass the board resolution 2021-22-27, I indicated that approving these resolutions does not necessarily mean I will approve a $3 million renovation. Just want it out there. However, I think doing this long-term needs study is an excellent way to ensure the best use of our special reserve fund and determine the options to best serve the staff and the public for the library. We have to be mindful of finding a balance between conserving and spending our special reserve fund in the most efficient way possible. So just wanted to make that statement. And then I also would like to see a not-to-exceed number on their contract, 26,000, 27, some number that gives them some cushion for their expenses, but also has some limit.
Or if there's also that, if it appears that the not-to-exceed number is going to be exceeded, that then there is more of a discussion with the board. So I think we as a board could say, you know, not to exceed $27,000. It's a $24,000 contract, you know, $2,000 or $3,000. But then if it appears that the numbers are going to be going beyond that for whatever reason, then we just need to have some more information as the board.
Sounds good?
Everyone feel comfortable with that? Trustee O'Keefe's recommendation?
27's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Well, then we will move to have a motion. And Trustee O'Keefe, would you like to?
Sure. Would you like
with your
me to make-
addendum? Yes, please. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I move approval of the strategic facilities plan proposal from Enberg Anderson in the amount of $27,000, or a not-to-exceed number of $27,000. In the unlikely event that it were to exceed $27,000, that then the Board of Trustees would have a discussion and move forward from there.
I second that.
Wonderful.
Can we have discussion on this now?
Sure.
I am very confused. I thought Joe suggested the not to exceed could be $500.
So we can put it at $500. We can put it at $1,000. If you're more comfortable with that,
I'm
very.
definitely more comfortable with that.
That's
yeah.
fine. That's
I
fine.
agree the message. I'd say 25,000.
Okay.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I don't think we have to split hairs on this.
I know.
I think what we just have to be aware of is the contract is $24,000. We're very excited for the contract. I think what we just need, as we're looking forward, we need to say we have a cap, we have a max. And should that cap or max be, it appears that it's exceeding that or going beyond that, then we have a little bit more discussion. Without the ethnographic research, we've eliminated that cost, which I think is very important, and I really appreciate that that has been eliminated at this point. I just think that we as a board need to say, let's just be aware if all of a sudden the costs begin to creep. So whether or not it's 25 or 27, I'm comfortable either way.
I just wanted to give him plenty of wiggle room in case something pops that, I'm fine.
Yeah, we've been assured that that's
Yeah.
probably not the case, but I think giving a little bit of cushion, so I appreciate a little bit of the the conversation about this. So we have a motion as amended.
Well, what number would make the Board of Trustees more comfortable than the number that I suggested?
It's slightly splitting hairs, so whatever the majority is, it's fine.
I would recommend going to 25,
Okay.
is my suggestion.
Okay.
Everyone seemed to be comfortable with that. Okay.
So why don't I, let me make a new motion, just for
motion.
the record.
Right.
I move approval of the Strategic Facilities Plan proposal from Enberg Anderson in the amount of not to exceed $25,000 as presented. This number includes the $24,000 contract price with $1,000 of potential reimbursable fees.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay. Thank you. A motion, any other discussion?
Do you want to talk about it?
No.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
I love
We
to
have
talk
a
about
motion.
I just,
We have a motion on the floor from Trustee O'Keefe and seconded by Trustee Summer. So seeing no other discussion, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Cox?
Yes?
Trustee DiLorenzo, yes. Trustee Nealon?
yes.
Trustee O'Keefe?
Yes.
Trustee Senate?
Yes.
Trustee Summer?
Yes.
Trustee Fishman?
Yes. Thank you. Motion passed. Thank you. Thanks, Joe, very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you for coming in this weather.
Thank you.
We look forward to working with you and your team. Thanks so much. Exciting. We'll now move on to our director's report. Director Austin, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I have some notes from my written report, and I'm happy to take some of your questions. I've prepared 4 pages of my, however long my report was. I don't necessarily need to cover all of this, but I'm very passionate about this place, and I love talking about all the really cool things that are going on. So I'll give you a brief summary, and then we can get into any other things. So statistically, looking at November, December, we're right on track with strong physical circulation. We're keeping pace with near identical numbers that we had in fiscal year 22-23, so we're doing really well there. Our digital circulation continues to impress with a stronger than average trend. In December, we did set a Wilmette library record for overdrive use with over 9,500 items loaned. That's pretty impressive. Our door counts continue to be remarkable and are increasing to over 700 users a day, which is rebounding strongly from our pandemic years, although we're still a little bit off the mark from where we were back in 2019. But has been observed, we're offering a lot of other options for folks to engage with us digitally, both for programs as well as for collections. So that could just be a trend that we're going to see going forward. Staff began tracking their public service contacts via our new digital management system, Gimlet, in this last quarter, and are officially all of our public service desks have rolled over to that for their collection of that data. Part of that data is submitted to the Illinois Public Library Annual Report each year as our directional and reference questions that the staff are handling, but we've got the ability to parse that data a little bit more and study trending. So staff is using that tool to analyze the way that they provision service at our various public service points, and we're really excited about the data points that we've already started to collect there. We've had a number of large shifts in our collections over the course of the last 2 months. We did extensive weeding and shifting in the compact disc collections, in the lower level on the 800s and 900s, the oversized collections, as well as the periodicals. And we had also shifted some of the youth collections in an effort to create space for an entirely new boutique collection that is called the Beginning Chapter Books. This bridges the collections that are the early readers and the J fiction. This is a project that was shared by 3 of our youth services librarians, Assistant Manager Lisa Bigelow and Youth Services Librarian Sherry Rita and Jennifer Lee. They helped to create this new section with the help from the Youth Services team, Technical Services, Shelving, and Circulation staff. And this new addition has drawn attention from our patrons immediately. We've also added some new collections in our Library of Things. I'm really excited about 4 new Roku streaming devices. We have 2 Max subscriptions and 2 Disney Plus subscriptions. We additionally added an external CD DVD player, a video capture kit, a solar panel, and a microscope for kids. Our collection priorities for 2024, we've asked all of our managers to identify what their priorities are for this next calendar year. And in technical services, we have some priorities for collections, and they relate to evaluating our available data and training staff on how to use these resources to aid the selectors in maintaining their collections. We're going to be working on how we evaluate our collections for our weeding procedures and metrics. We're looking to consolidate our loan rules to make it easier for patrons and staff to manage the collections and how we circulate them. We're going to be reviewing our consortial and interlibrary impacts on existing holds and purchase alert ratios. We've got a very strong holds ratio right now of 2 holds to 1 copy. That ensures that we're able to turn our items over quickly, but we continue to study those trends and determine that we're allocating our funds appropriately to support our collection needs. And we're also going to be completing a comprehensive review of our processing and spine label procedures. There are a number of steps that go into processing the materials and making them available to the public, and this process would help to enhance accessibility of collections and also make it easier for the staff to get them back in the right places on the shelves if we're able to consolidate some of those. So that's a big project, and we've been working on those things incrementally, but this is a more comprehensive review. All of that is due to the fact that we've seen 3 times the volume of withdrawn materials at the end of the year than we've seen in past months. So there's a lot of action that's going to maintaining our collections. And this is all part of our priority in trying to make the collections more vibrant, to showcase our new merchandising standards and to make the collections more accessible. But with that, we've got open shelves that we need to shift into and other priorities for how we're going to display those materials. So we're looking for some new strategies and procedures for how we're going to manage how we weed. On the circulation side of things, the library welcomed 132 entirely new patrons in November and 147 new users in December. So we're really excited about the way that we're still reaching new users. At year end, we had 87 patrons who opted into our recent policy update, allowing patrons to authorize a friend, neighbor, or family member to pick up their hold materials. We have a couple updates from adult services. I've talked a lot about our Stories of Exile programming. This was a grant-funded program that we offered this fall, and that series continued on through November and December, facilitated by our Adult Services Assistant Manager, Rachel Garcia. We had 4 book discussions, 3 supporting programs over 4 months, exploring themes of migration, exile, and forced displacement. All of the events were well attended, and patrons were really enthusiastic to engage. We had over 180 patrons who attended at least one event, and several community members chose to participate in multiple discussions and programs. We consider this a really successful event, and I want to thank the team for their efforts, and I also want to thank Trustee O'Keefe for bringing this grant to our attention. This month, we launched an entirely new community reading engagement event called Wilmette Reads. And we transitioned from the ideation to the specific planning stages during November and December, and officially launched the program as part of our New Year's Eve concert that was held in this room right before New Year's Eve. That was the Bobby Lewis Jazz concert. The event draws from the successful elements of both our long-running One Book Everyone Reads program, as well as the adult-teen iteration of the Winter Reading Club. Patrons are invited to customize their level and method of participation with an emphasis on how we connect with and to stories. This event is taking place over the course of January and February, and we've kind of flipped the script on how you participate in this program. We're encouraging people to just engage with us from the start, and we're rewarding them immediately for their interest. So you can, this was my choice. I got the stocking cap. Which is neatly
I
branded.
got the bag.
Love it.
That's
So
cute.
if you haven't already gotten your incentive to participate, we'd love to see you at the recent arrivals desk. We're happy to talk more about the programs that we have and discussions of our highlight title by Louise Erdrich, The Sentence. We've got a number of book discussions, including one today on that very book. So we'll have more information to share with you at next month's meeting as we're a little bit more along with the program, and we'll have some statistics to share with you. And as always, we want to thank our generous support from the Friends of the Wilmette Public Library for their financial support of this program. At the end of every calendar year, we have exam week, and the library turns into a study space for a good number of teens in our community. And one of our annual traditions is holding a teen study and pizza night. And this year, for the first time in as long as we can remember, New Trier High School and Loyola Academy held their finals on the exact same dates. So we had over 150 teens attend just that one teen study and pizza night, but that whole month we saw quite a few teens taking advantages of spaces all throughout the library to conduct their study. We hope they all did well. The culmination of months of preparation and collaboration, early December marked the official transition of the public access and computers and specialized equipment from the Technology Center, moving into the open service floor on the south side of the building adjacent to the former reference desk. The reference desk was transformed into the shared reference and technology desk and is now staffed with partners from both digital and maker services as well as adult services. Thanks to effective tone setting and proactive assistance from staff at all service points, the adjustment for the public has been largely smooth. And remaining pieces of this project include assessing the implications for nearby collections that may need to be moved as a result of these changes. But so far, we're really excited about the opportunities, and that kind of tees us up for the next stage, which is the reopening of the room that was formerly the Technology Center, and launching the studio, our new makerspace. And I'll share more about that with you in February, as we are going to have the soft launch of the studio next Wednesday, January 24th. And we invite you to come by and check it out. The official grand opening of the studio will be when we host our Maker Fest on March 19th. No, that's not the right date. What is the date of someone?
It's like
I'll get that for you in a second.
One moment.
March
It's the 9th.
9th.
It's the 9th.
March 9th. April 19th is the Staff Development Day. Okay, there we go. All right. Let's learn together. On November 30th, librarians Krista Hutley and Sarah Jo Zaharako hosted a panel discussion, Social Stress, a Let's Learn Together parent-teacher education program to address social stresses specific to adolescents and teens. And we had panelists from New Trier High School, Counseling Center of the North Shore, as well as Family Services of Glencoe, along with our librarians, and discussed the science of the adolescent brain, strategies for embracing stress as a productive emotion, and positive communication tips for parents and teens. Our Let's Learn Together initiative continues to be an incredible initiative from our youth services team, and I'm thrilled to see the programming that we're continuing to do, as well as what we're going to be launching as our major initiative later this year. And I'll share more about that with you in the coming months. We're seeing impressive work by our youth services staff with community engagement and outreach to area schools and partners. There are several pages of my report that are dedicated to that this month. I also saw a very large section dedicated to our partnership with the North Shore Special Recreation Association, an SSRA, that kicked off in November with 7 group visits to the library. Those students came through and were able to participate in, basically 6 departments were kind of led welcome tours throughout the library, introducing our spaces, engaged in various programs. We shared statistics. We shared the ways that the library conducts our business, tours back of house to the automated material handling system, as well as to the mechanical rooms. You can see in all those pictures just how engaged the participants were and how much they enjoyed the program. All of these are part of our welcome tours, which are now becoming a standard offering at the library. And you can learn more about our welcome tours on our website. There's a link in my report to that. Some of the group members tested our 3D printed assistive devices, and we shared a post about that on social media, and that post was picked up by a national community awareness campaign that highlights the vital roles of public libraries called Geek the Library, and we were pretty thrilled that they recognized us for that. Those 3D printed assistive devices came from our Digital and Maker Services team, and our Digital and Maker Services team has been hard at work, particularly the full-time staff, meeting bi-weekly and making great progress on planning the maker space. In November, we officially chose the name of the studio, and then we worked out a number of details determining the amount and frequency of supply limits, how we're going to track that, doing a number of logistical details, installing furnishings, provisioning equipment, and in December, they clarified even more of those details, and just in the last week, we've seen tremendous progress in outfitting that space, including the installation of a brand new TV for that space that went in today. Like I said, come next week and check it out when we open it. It's going to look lovely. Lauren really worked proactively with the facilities staff in getting that technology center turned into the studio, and a lot of that work took place late last year. The facilities team shampooed the carpets, painted the space, a beautiful purple accent wall, assembled furnishings, and did more. The space does really look great, and we continue to add to it. Linnea drafted the studio webpage, which is not launched, but will be very soon when we go live next Wednesday. And as part of all of this, with this new service point, we recruited, interviewed, hired, and are in the process of training two new members to our DMS team, Sabrina and Doug, who are going to help to support the current and emerging scope of duties for the team. I mentioned the Bobby Lewis program earlier. We had over 100 participants to that program, including a couple of our trustees here. Thank you for attending.
It's
fun. Couple project updates. The telephone system replacement project continues to move forward with an anticipated launch date now set for February. As Trustee Summer mentioned, we're still on our Comcast bill for some of that, but a lot of that's going to move over to GoTo here very soon. The stakeholders continue to meet regularly and plan the multiple steps that are necessary to migrate from an on-premises system to the new cloud-based interface. CVI is going to be an integral partner for us in this move and will help with the networking cutover on the day that we ultimately cut over, which we're slating for February 7th at this point. We're preparing some training materials and an orientation to the new system, including new desktop software and a mobile app interface that will be available to all staff that have a dedicated phone. This will help to facilitate our availability to work remotely, and we're going to provide that training for staff here at the end of January. Other big project that's going on right now is our building automation system, a partner project with Ingberg Anderson, and we're approaching the finish line with that. We're just going through the punch list right now, and I shared some details with you all about that last week. And then finally, a couple personnel notes. Mike and I, HR manager Mike Boone and I, we're in the final stages of reviewing and updating the employee handbook and a number of personnel policies. Once all the sections have been reviewed and updated, we plan to submit them to our HR consultant as well as our HR legal representative for review. We'll discuss those changes with the leadership team, and then once we're all on the same page about those details, we'll call upon the policy committee to get together so that we can review and discuss those changes with you all before adopting them and making them official. And then the final piece that I wanted to share with you all is an update on an employee. After 31 years of dedicated service to the library and community, our ILL coordinator, Louise Nydorf, has announced that she will be retiring at the end of January. Louise started at Wilmette Library back in October of '92 as a full-time circulation clerk, and shortly after she started, Louise became the assistant to the circulation manager at the time, and her role evolved into the acting circulation assistant manager for the department. 5 years later, Louise took on the responsibilities of heading up our interlibrary loan services, and she has been instrumental ever since in creating, developing, and refining the practices and procedures that the ILL team follows to this day. With Louise's unprecedented determination and meticulous attention to detail, she's created an incredibly thorough step-by-step ILL procedural guide to help train staff and ensure consistent continuity of service. Louise has cultivated strong relationships with patrons who rely on our ILL services, especially the 28 local book clubs, which she tracks down multiple copies of titles for them each month. Louise's work ethic, commitment to high-quality service, and her sense of humor are going to be greatly missed. Whew. I made that through dry-eyed. I love Louise. That is, yeah, congratulations to Louise. She's
Over
earned.
at the desk by the fireplace?
Louise's office is right at the foot of the stairs on the first floor. So that's where the ILL office is. Yep. All right. So we're in the hunt for a solution for that role. Do you all have any questions, comments about my report?
I have a couple comments.
Please.
I was thrilled to see the teen librarian, Krista, going to the warming house. I think that's an excellent way to try to engage the teen population. That was really innovative. That's great.
I made the same comment. And I think it's probably because Tracy and I were on the mental health committee.
Yes.
And we've had discussions about the warming house, so I was also really thrilled as it had been closed and now it's opening, and I think they're looking to expand its reach. So that and the Mather Place outreach, it was just really great to see these community partnerships.
I had a question, and, I saw, unfortunately, we had some HVAC issues. Those things that are going to be the furnish and install, those several items, and maybe this is something you can just answer later. I just wondered, those aren't special reserve because they were found in update? I mean, why are they not special reserves, and what's the approximate cost? Maybe you don't know yet?
So these are items we felt were within the tolerance of building maintenance that we can handle within the operating budget. But if there is a philosophical approach that the board would like to take, whether conserving the special reserve for the large-scale project that we were just discussing, a little earlier in this meeting, we can accomplish these replacements within the operating budget.
Okay.
We do build in a bit of that each year as part of building maintenance. And we've got several lines that are dedicated to that. Some of those details may be able to be handled within even our contractual agreement as part of regular routine maintenance. Others are, supplies that we would just update and replace equipment that way. This was a larger thing. It wasn't anticipated. We do have that 20-year capital reserve study that does have an inventory of every single item in the building and accounts for its replacement cycle. And a lot of those items are eligible for special reserve expense. So if it is the will of the board to say, debit those items from the special reserve fund versus the general operating fund, that's certainly a philosophy that we could discuss and how you'd like to proceed.
I didn't know how much it was going to cost. I mean, is it $5,000 or $30,000?
Yeah, less than 25.
Okay.
It doesn't require a public bid,
Okay.
so we accomplish it within the general operating. But it is a philosophical thing, and we could line item those items, We can talk more about that.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not sure. It was more of a question. I'm not really philosophically sure how I feel. I just didn't know how much it was going to cost, and how it came up is that typically how you would do it was as a building maintenance. So-
Typically, yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
When something is broken, requiring repair, it's something more like that. If it's a larger scale, planned expenditure, then those typically, things that we would go out to bid for, things that we would use a consultant to help us for, those would be things that would be eligible for debit from special reserve. This is too, it is a piece of capital infrastructure, but like I said, we do budget for a certain degree of this type of repair in our building operating budget.
And you're comfortable with that, you'll be able to stay with it? I don't want you to find at the end of the year, because you had to use this for a building maintenance, that you were out of.
That is another approach that we could take. I mean, there could be another such repair that we would need to take, in the next quarter. And at that time, we may make the decision to retroactively make a journal entry to call this a special reserve expense. And that would be something that we could discuss as
Okay.
part of the board meeting at that time.
Okay.
There's a number of ways that we could
Yeah.
handle that, yeah.
Okay.
But the good news is it has been provisioned and will be replaced here soon,
Great.
because sometimes there can be a very long lead time on a project like that. So we're really grateful that we do have the proactive agreement for the contract for preventative maintenance on the HVAC system.
Okay, great. That's fine. I appreciate that program statistics in this form. This is awesome. I think it's really easy to quickly go through it, so whoever's doing it, tell them thank you. It's great. And I also thank the staff that are here tonight. It was really great for you guys to come at the end of a long day, so thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Austin, for teasing out. One other thing I noticed, and I was delighted, that our notary service, which I think is so useful, it's a small issue, but it's getting a lot of pickup, and that's a good thing. Another service to the community. So, wonderful. Thank you so much. And yes, thanks to our staff for coming. Appreciate your time this evening. We'll now move on to our committee reports and ILA and Rails. Trustee Nealon, anything to report?
Do not have anything at this time.
All right. Director Austin?
No report.
Anything? Okay. And Trustee Nealon, our Intergovernmental Cooperation Committee update?
We have a date for the next meeting, which is March 4th at 5 p.m.
Great.
Do you want to tell them what we're doing? Well, Trish and I are working on making a list of mental health is the theme of the, mental health is the theme, and Trish and I are working on, at the behest of the group, of putting together a list of mental health providers, services, that we're still working within the group as to how this is going to go, but at least so that each agency can then have some sort of a listing of services that would be available for them, for their staff to use. So Trish and I
We are creating the database.
We are creating
have a
the
Google
database, yes.
Doc open.
Yeah.
We're doing it. Already, I was talking to Tracy today, we've noticed there's some gaps. And I think this is a really good exercise. Like we noticed that there was a gap in domestic violence services. What else did we notice? Some services for older adults.
domestic violence, I actually had some, but.
Also, there are government services that are national services, like calling 988 and, findhelp.com, and all that information can be out there, I think. So.
Okay, so you're kind of a little more fine-tooth comb going through.
We're working on it. We're creating the database, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Where will the database reside and who will have access to it?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Oh, where will the database reside? Like, on what platform and
Well, that's a
who
good
has
question.
access?
The Intergovernmental Committee, Nutria Township website contains most of this information. It has for some time. There's more to add, and in the intergovernmental meetings, there's been a discussion about where do we start, how do we get going, do we need personnel, do we need how should the police be involved, what are the community needs right now, why don't people know about these resources that are available? So one of the first things to consider is getting the information organized and to the various government bodies, and then they can go ahead and decide, do they want to put this on their website? So what do we do with it? So, I mean, we're not really telling the other government bodies what they should do with this information. We're just saying, here it is. And then other decisions will be made down the road. Maybe there is something beyond just information. Maybe there are some services that we could create. So
This is really, it's been a struggle to get to step one. But step one is putting the database together. And
yeah,
I
we have
like
to
that you're doing it as a database. There is a list on the village website. It's very difficult to find. It's from 2018. You've probably encountered it already. It's a 10-page PDF. It has very little information about each individual agency, but it does list them.
I'll have to check. I've only started the township and what I know through my work, and so, but yeah, it's not going to be perfect, but it will be hopefully helpful to the library if they have a patron who might recognize they need services, or someone at the park district, but at least a starting point where things can be put together.
I think it would be nice if every unit just had a little tab up in a corner somewhere that you could just click on to get to it.
We'll see what
Yeah, we did talk about marketing, and the question comes down to, like, who provides this information to this wonderful person who's going to be doing the marketing?
Yep.
So, I mean, there are a lot of open questions still.
Yeah.
Who manages it? So we're moving forward anyway.
A work in progress.
A work in
For
progress,
sure.
yep.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update. And thanks for your willingness to jump in. Great. We have our communications that we will pass around in the purple folder here, our suggestion boxes. And then, is there any new business? All right, seeing none, then we are ready to have a motion to adjourn. It's 8:06. Is there a motion?
I move that the board adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. And voice vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you so much. Our meeting is adjourned at 8:06.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.